This week we're going to be discussing insulation on the top. So we covered in depth down versus synthetic a few weeks ago, but today we're just going to be focusing on sleeping bags, quilts, or cocoons. One thing to remember is you always want top and bottom insulation, meaning you need your bag on top, but you never just want to lay on the ground. If you remember when we were discussing insulation, the way insulation keeps you warm is it lofts up, it becomes big and fluffy, and it captures all that heat, right? So if you have something that's lofted, and actually let's just use this. So if you have, these are my down socks, we'll talk more about them later. You do look like a Christmas elf, but they're awesome. But see how lofted these are? If you put this underneath you and you lay on it and it compresses, there's nothing catching the heat anymore. So you just lost all of your heat holding insulation. Let's first talk about cocoons. So the benefit of a cocoon, it's a one and done setup. You buy the cocoon, you don't have to fiddle with something on top, something on bottom. You buy the cocoon, you slide it over the top of your hammock and cinch it up at either end, and you're covered. You're completely enclosed with it. So you're gonna be warm on top and bottom. That insulation underneath, that goes underneath you, is gonna be catching all of that heat. The downside is it's bulky, it's heavy. The biggest problem is you really can't breathe. And so after a while, you keep waking up, you have to open that zipper to breathe. If it's a cold night, you're gonna zip it up again real quick because a lot more air comes in than you want. There are a bunch of companies that are coming out. I can't think of any off the top of my head because I've never been interested in a cocoon. I had a buddy who had one at one point. He returned it. He wasn't the biggest fan of it because we went camping and it was down into the mid-20s. And all those reasons I explained, that's what we experienced. I tried it as well and I felt that same thing. So if you wanna go for a cocoon, great. But be aware of those downsides that are going to happen. Now let's move on to sleeping bags. The benefit of the sleeping bag is I really think it's just the most familiar. When I was looking at buying hammocks, or when I was looking at getting into bike packing, I actually picked up this little guy. This is the Big Agnes Gun Creek 30. I didn't want to spend a lot of money. This is just a synthetic bag. It's more of a 40 degree, even though they claim a 30. But it was a great starter bag. I got it because it was the most familiar. If you're camping outside, why wouldn't you use a sleeping bag? The specifications, you've got an awesome hood, you've got a zipper to be able to unzip it, climb in, zip it back up once you're in, and you can just cinch this right around your head. It's nice. It is somewhat of a one and done in terms of your top insulation because you don't need something separate to go on your head. Big Agnes realized that as soon as you lay on that insulation, it's useless. So they got rid of it and they put in this pad sleeve. So you fill up a pad, and it doesn't have to be a Big Agnes pad, any pad that meets these dimensions. You fill up the pad, you slide it in, and it's connected to you, so you're never rolling off. So if you are ground camping, Big Agnes is a pretty cool option because of that. And it keeps it lightweight because they get rid of that insulation in the bottom. I can't think of anything else as to why you would grab that over a quilt. What is a quilt? Great question. This is your quilt. They call it a quilt because it's just a big blanket, right? So what are the main benefit with a quilt? The reason you would get that is because you can get warmer and it's lighter. Now, you're not just going warmer and having it be the same weight. This 20 degree quilt is gonna be lighter than most 50 degree sleeping bags, high-end down sleeping bags. This is still gonna be lighter. The reason they saw that, or they can do that, is they take all of the insulation out of the bottom. Notice how there's no zipper, okay? So to make this easier, quilt companies do it differently. Some will have a zipper right here that you can zip open and open it up so it's completely like a quilt, right, from top to bottom. In a hammock, that's not the greatest because your feet are elevated. It's always gonna be coming off of your feet. So I wanted it enclosed on the bottom. So this one is sewn in up until the back of your knees, and then it's open. The reason some people would want to open this up completely is for temperature management. That is the biggest benefit to a quilt. Well, that's one of the big benefits to a quilt over a sleeping bag. Let's say you head out camping and you're stoked for your adventure, and it's gonna be in the 30s, okay, for most of your trip. Great. But let's say out of nowhere you get a 40 or a 50 degree night, which happens often. Your temperature management is a pain in the butt with a sleeping bag. You're constantly opening up your sleeping bag. Once it's open, you get cold. So you're gonna whip that, close it back up. Now you're gonna be sweating to death. So you're gonna open it back up. Now you're freezing to death again, okay? A quilt, you do not have that problem. The reason you don't have that problem is because if it's a warmer, let's say in the middle of the night, it gets really hot. Just open up the back of your sleeping bag so it's open like this, and now you're gonna get a small draft coming through. So you just turn this 20-degree bag into a 45-degree bag, and you're gonna sleep very comfortably. Notice on this quilt is there's no hood. That might scare people. You might think, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get freezing. Truth be told, when I'm summer camping, when it's June through mid-September, honestly, I don't get cold in the slightest on my head. So I don't even bring a hood. But because it is a quilt, they make a separate hood setup. It's a balaclava, and I'll cover that here in just a second. So you don't need to worry about that. The benefit of being able to remove that hood completely is when you don't need it, you're not carrying that extra weight. Like I've said, when you're doing this whole pack setup for bike packing, my pack is about 15 pounds. That's with full water. When I'm riding downhill, it's generally about 11 or 12 pounds. And so you're gonna notice every half pound when you're going so lightweight. So when we talk in terms of half pounds, 8 ounces, that actually means something. You don't have to worry, you don't have to think, oh my gosh, it's open, I'm gonna freeze when it's cold outside. You're gonna button this up all the way down. That's gonna close it up underneath you. And so now there's no heat escaping. And you're gonna pair that with an underquilt setup that we're going to cover in a later episode. And that's how you'll use insulation on the bottom, or a pad if you would prefer a pad, but we're gonna cover multiple options. But that's gonna keep you warm, so you don't have to worry about getting too chilly. With the quilt set up, because there is no hood, now this is gonna look silly for a second, but it doesn't look silly when you're toasty warm at night. So this is the balaclava. There are many companies that go with it, or that make a balaclava. This is Goose Feet gear. I love Enlightened Equipment setup and all their quilts and all their accessories. However, I tested out some of the Enlightened Equipment balaclava and socks, the down socks, or their synthetic socks, and they didn't keep me that warm. So I did a little more research, and I went with Goose Feet gear. I like it because I can cinch this up, and it'll cinch up the entire face. So the way this works is you're gonna throw it on, I'll put it on, and then I'm gonna cinch this up. And yes, I will look silly. But you've got this on like this, okay? It comes down low, so your under quilt right here, I will show you. You button that up, and then you cinch that, right? Where this cinches is gonna be right around your neck, right here where it's cinching up. It's gonna get really tight, and then you can cinch this up like that. So it's just like a sleeping bag setup, but you don't have to carry the extra 8 ounces when you don't want to. The last thing we're gonna do with quilts are down socks. If you're hammocking, so it doesn't matter if you choose a cocoon or you choose a sleeping bag, whatever you want, when the temperatures dip, because your feet are elevated, they are always going to be freezing. So I purchased these down socks. Like I said, the down socks, we're gonna cover which top quilt I specifically went with in the next episode. So that's why I haven't said the brand of the top quilt. However, we're not gonna be covering balaclavas and down socks again. So this balaclava was my Goose Feet gear. I think it was $75. And then these socks were the same Goose Feet gear, and I think they're about that same price. You're just gonna go ahead and slide it on. You're gonna look like a goofy Christmas elf, but you're not walking around the campsite. And you're toasty. And if it's especially cold, I know they look silly, but if it's especially cold, what you can actually do is put on a normal pair of socks, and then put on toe warmers on bottom, and then put on another pair of really loose-fitting fluffy socks over the top of that, and then put on these, and your feet it'll feel like an oven. To end the episode, I want to go with my choice. I obviously went with the quilt. Why did I go with it? Same reason why I say in every episode, and I'm probably going to keep saying that every episode, it is the lightest option out there. This quilt setup, which, like I said, I'll cover in the next episode, weighs 21 ounces. There's not a bag out there that can be that lightweight, especially in the summer. It's so comfortable. The quilt I love, so why did I went with the quilt? Because of its lightweight capability and because of the temperature management. That is huge. It's not always gonna stay cool. It's not always gonna stay warm. I love that if one night's 40 degrees versus 20 degrees, which when you're at 10,000 feet happens often, I'm able to adjust accordingly and sleep very comfortably. Sleeping bag I couldn't do that with, and Cocoon was a nightmare. I'm excited to see you for the next episode.